afternoon to all my dear brothers and sisters gathered here today. First of all, we at Tibet House are very grateful to our speakers for accepting our invitation and being part of this panel. And I also would like to thank to all the participants for joining today's program. So for this session, we have Professor L.P. Singh and as our chairperson, and the speakers for our second session are Professor Mahesh Ashok Devkar and Venerable Geshe Lode Sangwola. And we will have 20 minutes Q&A session in the end of this session. So please, I request everyone to request your questions until the end. So I now request our chairperson and speakers to kindly come up on stage and take your respective seats. Thank you. Thank you all. So before I proceed with today's session, I would like to share a brief introduction about our chairperson. Our chairperson, Professor L.P. Singh, spent about 2 decades as a mendicant in search of truth and salvation. He was awarded Doctor in Literature from Ranchi University in 1972. He retired as a professor of philosophy from Magadh University, Bodh Gaya, in January 1996, and in February of the same year, he became Senior Fellow of the Indian Council of Philosophical Research, Government of India, for 3 years. In 2000, Professor L.P. Singh was awarded Fellowship in Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla. He became a visiting research professor in 2004 at the Catholic University of America, Washington, D.C. He was also awarded Indo-French Cultural Fellowship in 1994. During his sojourn at Paris, he delivered lectures at the Department of Philosophy, Sorbonne University for Paris. He also addressed the students and staff members of Nihon and Toyo University, Tokyo, in 2006. He delivered a special lecture at the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, Khon Kaen University, Thailand. Sorry if I mispronounced, in 2013. Thank you. Now I request our chairperson to kindly lead the session. Thank you.
Om Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhasya. I salute the monks and the nuns present here and friends. I am very grateful to Geshe Lamdum for inviting me to come and preside over the sessions. I was in 2 minds whether I should accept the invitation or not, because in these days I am living almost a withdrawn life. So I am in search of course, like all of you, my own identity and destiny. And sometimes start talking like myself, like Buddha has advised you, talk to yourself. You try to understand yourself. So, all these things, so because I thought that Geshe Lamdung is such an enlightened monk, and when I come here, then I will get some blessings from him. Actually, I met him 1 or 2 years back when both of us were traveling to Sarnath to attend some seminar there at the Tibetan Higher Studies. Both of us are the member of the executive committee of that Sansthan. So I was very much impressed by Geshe Lamdung, and I thought that I would get another opportunity of meeting him. Actually, I have also written book on Buddhism. It is 2 books. One is on Buddhist Tantra, another is on Zen Buddhism. And I feel that when Buddha got enlightenment under the Bodhi tree at Bodh Gaya, then he started to understand the nature and the significance of nirvana. And out of that came Buddhism. So he started. Then he started to understand, to deal some of the soteriological and reflective metaphysical problems. And you just see that teachings of Buddha is so profound, so sublime, that the different acharya have interpreted in different way at the different periods of time. But because of that doesn't speak of the poverty of the teachings of Buddha, but the sublimity and profundity of the Buddha teachings. It's a tradition here also. If you just go through some of the Vedanta literature, then what is the canonical literature of Vedanta? Upanishad, Brahma Sutra and Gita. But that canonical literatures have been interpreted by different acharya like Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya and Madhvacharya and other and different school of Vedanta. So like that the Buddhism, different aspects of the different dimensions of Buddha's teachings have been explained by different acharya. And to my mind, of course, the Tripitaka is the basis, no doubt about it, Tripitaka is the basis. But the Tripitaka has been interpreted by Nagarjuna, Vasubandhu, others, Kamal Seal, in a different way. But they all did same basic problems, soteriological and the metaphysical problem. I consider Buddha is the greatest philosopher that the world has produced till this day in the annals of human history. Because Buddha is the Lord, Buddha is the only person who had not only founded a school of philosophy, but the world religious order. So there is no one in the whole world, in the annals of human history, that who have the distinction and the honor of founding the school. When we say the school of philosophy or philosophical system, it means it has original metaphysics, epistemology, logic, aesthetics, so on these different. So this is the school of philosophy. And the school of philosophy, and at the same time, you see that a religious world order. I consider that the philosophy of nirvana and the compassion, the Buddhist religion is full of compassion. So Buddhist religion is of compassion, and philosophy is that metaphysical foundation of the nirvana. So these are two different, say, aspects of the Buddhism religion, and then of course it has been interpreted by different way also, and there has been a lot of controversy has been raised in the Buddhist world also, because one of the person who was the instrumental in taking Buddhism to the West, Mrs. Rhys Davis, she has raised this problem that the core concept of Buddhism, Anitya, Anatma, Dukh, she has said that Buddhism is the world religion, profound religion. How could it be dominated by some negative thoughts? So say no, but she has argued that the concept of this sufferings and nirvana, that is, anit, anatma and dukkha, has been interpolated in the teachings of Buddha. But that is not a part of the Buddha's teachings. But you know that in every religious traditions, there are inbuilt mechanism to defend it. If we don't believe in the authenticity of the Tripitaka, that will say that we have to question the authenticity of Vedas. We have to question the authenticity of the Avesta. We have to question the authenticity of Bible. So the original teachings of Buddha has been preserved, and of course it was the first time rendered in, say, the Singhali language at the time of in 82, when that I'm forgetting the name of the king that has been done. And of course after that the different traditions has been, and I have the fortune of visiting Sri Lanka also, and I know that. So all these things, so I have personally been greatly influenced by Buddha's teachings, and of course with the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi also. But it's so profound that Buddha's teachings are coming even the latest scientific development like quantum mechanics is coming closer to Buddha's teachings, particularly the Pratit Samutpat. And if you just read and try to understand the concept of Pratisamutpat, then you will find that the seed of the principles of uncertainty, which has been propounded by Heisenberg in 1935, which is the foundation of quantum mechanics, it is there in Pratisamutpat. So I just request some of the scholars, particularly the Buddhist scholars, that try to see something about relevance of Buddhism. Buddhism is the most relevant. It is more relevant today than it was relevant at the time of, in the 6th century BC. 6th century BC is known as the era of Renaissance. In India, Buddha, Mahavir. In China, Lao Tse and Confucius. In Greek tradition, you will find that Heraclitus, Parmenides, all these things. So that is the age of the Renaissance, era of Renaissance. And it is very, very relevant today. And I personally feel that teachings of Buddha could alone save the world today from the total annihilation. So that way it is very important, and I have had the fortune of interacting with meeting with His Holiness Dalai Lama, because I was a professor of philosophy at Magad University, Bodh Gaya, for more than 25 years. And I have so many times I invited him also. There I was the general secretary of one of the organization. He is the president, Shiva Maitreya project. So I came in very close contact with His Holiness, and even I went to McLeodganj and with a delegation, because he has stopped visiting, yearly visit to Bodh Gaya for certain political reason. Then we requested him and he accepted our invitation and continued that. And with that, so I am really grateful to Geshe, Venerable Geshe Damlu, and because of him I have come here. And I consider very fortunate in meeting lot of persons here, very enlightened person here. Now I'm, there are two speakers only, so I would just like to introduce the first speaker, Professor Mahesh Ashok Devkar.
I think there is no need because I was already introduced in the morning. So
We have been introduced in the morning.
so
Okay,
I
then
think we
please.
can save time.
Okay, then I request you to continue from here also, we can talk. Okay. Pardon? Oh, okay.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
I have given a briefing.
So let me just have a look at the watch first before I start. Anyway, so I have 30 minutes, right? Yeah. So thank you very much. I pay my reverence to the honorable members of the Sangha and the chairperson of this session, Professor L.P. Singh ji, and my co-panelist, Lode Sempaji, and so very good afternoon to all of you. Of course, this is a most challenging session after lunch, so I'm not so much worried about getting slips here, but getting slips there. So, so please watch out so that you don't get much. Actually, my visit here was planned, but my topic is not so much planned. It was more like an accident. Unfortunately, my office, sent a different abstract than what I actually prepared for the conference, and therefore I had a different topic. But when I saw it in the program, I thought that okay, that's also a good thing, because I saw that many speakers are already talking about the basic concept of Eightfold Path and the four Brahma Viharas. So I thought that it's good for me that I can say something different. So in this 30 minutes, what I plan to do is I'll just bring up some aspects of the Eightfold Path just to complete the discussion. I mean, we had already speakers discussing this in the morning, but there are just few things which I would like to point out as an addition to our discussion. Because I think in a conference like this, it's our joint effort to actually cover all different aspects of the topic. And then in the second half, I will be talking about, as our honorable chairperson just now mentioned, about the relevance of these teachings in modern times. And I'll be talking about two important thinkers in this connection. One is Acharya Dharmananda Kosambi, and the second is Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. Okay, so just to start with, just one point about the Eightfold Path, which we should always keep in mind, is that, as Buddha has said, that he is a discoverer of a path, right? He is not someone who has created this path. So we have discourses in the Pali Canon, and we also have parallels, of course, of this in the Mahayana Sutras, like Lankavatara, where we are talking about the city of Nirvana and the Buddha discovering the path leading to that city of Nirvana, which was, in a way, was somehow forgotten, was lost in the bushes of ignorance and oblivion, and he is someone who discovered it. So that's an important point to note, because that in a way highlights the the eternal nature of this path. So this path in itself does not depend on the Buddha to be there, right? So the Buddha says that no matter whether the Buddha is there or not, but this path is always there. So whosoever follows this path will reach the city of Nirvana. So this is something which highlights the independent kind of nature of the Eightfold Path. That was one point which I thought that I must highlight. The second point which I want to also discuss here is that, see, the very word path, I mean in English, but in Sanskrit and Pali, in Sanskrit we have the word marga, which is magga in Pali. And marga, the word marga in Sanskrit is actually, it is come from the root mrug, to search. I mean, this is how the commentators always love to define it. So this is something which goes in search of nirvana, right? So it has nirvana as its object. So this is a path which has a fixed goal. The goal is already decided, and that is nirvana, right? And so one has to always keep in mind that when we are talking about the Eightfold Path, the Eightfold Path has nothing but nirvana for its goal. There is another etymology of this word which is highlighted by scholars, and that is from the root mru, or in Pali we say mar, that means to kill, to destroy, right? Marna, Hindi mein. So this is a path which goes on destroying all the impediments, hindrances on this on our journey to nirvana, right? So that tells us basically the application or the function of the Eightfold Path. The function is to remove all the difficulties, hindrances, obstacles on the path to nirvana. So whatever comes in the way of nirvana is removed by this path. So this etymological explanation, again, as I said, is important because it shows the goal of the Eightfold Path and its function. So from these 2 points of view, the etymological understanding is very important. And when we talk about the commentary literature in Indian tradition, it always loves to link all these words with their basic concepts. And so they're always helpful, I mean, to understand the underlying concept. Now, when we discuss the path, as we have already seen that it has 8 limbs, and therefore it is called Ashtangika Marga. And in the morning, as Dr. Lata Devkar had made a reference to this Mahachatalisa Sutta, which talks about not 8 but 10 constituents, 10 limbs of this path. So then it becomes kind of a Dashanga Marga, not Ashtanga Marga. There it adds, I mean, the sutta adds right knowledge and right liberation. So jnana and vimukti as 2 additional aspects of this path. Now this, in a way, completes the course, right? Because when we talk about the Eightfold Path, we talk about morality, we talk about concentration, we talk about wisdom. But ultimately, where does it lead a practitioner to? So it leads a practitioner to knowledge, right? Knowledge, and then that ultimately leads to liberation, right? So in this way, this Eightfold Path becomes Tenfold Path, and it is very interesting that actually in the Pali canon we have this Anguttara Nikaya, which is famous for its numeric classification. So it groups discourses of the Buddha referring to 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, 4 points, such in this order. But when it talks about there is a Attaka Nipata where we have the groups of 8, and interestingly there we don't have the mention of Eightfold Path, which we otherwise would expect. But we have these 10 limbs discussed, in the group of 10. So this also can throw some light on the development of this on these ideas, right? The next I would just like to refer to is the understanding of different limbs. I will not repeat what other speakers, learned speakers have already mentioned, but I'll just add a few things just to, as I said, to complement what they have already said. Now, how to understand the Eightfold Path? I mean, there is in terms of classification, we have already discussed in the morning the threefold classification into Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna, right? So morality, concentration, and understanding, or insight, or wisdom. But then there is also twofold classification where we talk in terms of understanding and practice. So in that kind of classification, Samyak Drishti, right view, forms the understanding group, whereas the remaining 7 limbs go into the practice part. Okay, so this is another classification which is significant. Now, let's talk a bit about these different limbs. When we talk about the right view, as you all know, I mean, Geshe-la in his talk several times always highlights this importance of view in Buddhism, the importance of view. I mean, this is very significant. Otherwise, I mean, what we say is that in most of the religious traditions, morality, concentration have lots of similarities. When we try to compare them, we see lots of similarities. But what is you can say a unique feature or distinguishing feature of Buddhism, and that is in its right view, right? So the right view is the most important aspect. Now, before that, let me also tell you that you know, we in the morning we discuss about the place of Eightfold Path as a part of the scheme of Four Noble Truths, right? So it is the fourth truth of the scheme of Four Noble Truths. And this is something, I mean, there are 3 truths which are important. But the most important truth, if one may ask, is the truth of the Eightfold Path, because that is something which brings the Buddha Dhamma in the field of realization, in the field of your experience. Otherwise, it is more theoretical, right? So, suffering, knowing suffering, its origin, its cessation. But all that one realizes only when it comes to the practice of the Eightfold Path. So, Eightfold Path as a fourth truth, in a way, carries the essence of Buddhism or Buddha's teaching. And it is a very comprehensive teaching. So, as they say that the teaching of Four Noble Truths, the Buddha compared it with the footprint of an elephant, in which all footprints of all other animals can go in. Similarly, we can say that Eightfold Path is a teaching in which all other teachings of the Buddha can be incorporated. We'll see how that could happen. Anyway, so when we talk about I'll come back after this a small excursus. So when we talk about the view, you see, I mean, there we have difference when we discuss like Theravada and Mahayana schools. In the Theravada system, of course, it is quite clearly mentioned that knowing Four Noble Truths, knowing 3 characteristics of existence, knowing Pratitya Samutpada, right? The doctrine of dependent co-arising. Now, these are the 3 essential aspects of the right view. Elsewhere, right view is also understood as believing in the law of karma, the efficacy of good and bad actions, right? Like donation and so on. So this is something which is understood roughly as right view in the Theravada tradition. Now, when we go to Madhyamaka or Yogacara schools, now there of course, we add few things. So, for example, for the Yogacara or for the Chittamatra, knowing that whatever we experience is mind only, would form a right view. For a Madhyamaka, understanding that everything is empty would form a part of the right view, right? Now, so there would be a kind of a variation at this part, because as you all know, I mean, the Theravada school is primarily from a philosophical point of view, they are realists, right? So they believe in the real existence of a world outside, right? So, but when it comes to the Chittamatra, for example, we say that whatever we experience is mind only. Now then, actually the basic questions come up, like when you try to make sense of the remaining parts of the Noble Eightfold Path, how are you going to work with this view? And therefore, in sutras like, I just recall, like Vimalakirti Nirdesha Sutra, for example, in chapter 6 discusses, I mean, there's a question asked, if you think that the world is a mere reflection, then how would you make sense of the practice of Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, and Upeksha, right? And there, or we see again in the sutra like Vajrachedika Prajnaparamita sutras, we talk about, okay, now we know the ultimate reality is that the world is empty, right, of any independent existence. But then where is the scope for practicing the Eightfold Path if everything is empty? And there you see, I mean, the way these schools try to understand the Eightfold Path in that particular, from the particular viewpoint, is quite interesting. I mean, that is something where the beauty of the Buddhism lies, because we have different philosophical standpoints, and from that different perspective, we are viewing the path, because the path is same. Path does not differ, but when your view differs, the way you look at it as a practitioner would differ. So in the Prajnaparamita literature, we talk about, for example, like the Chanda Pranidhana level, where we make aspiration, and at aspiration level, we take recourse to the Samruti Sat, the conventional reality. Whereas when we slowly start moving to the Yoga Samapatti part, where we are actually practicing and start kind of realizing the truth, we try to, also work on deconstructing our ego, and this is where we bring in the Paramartha Sat, and actually with the combination of both, that's the Prajna Paramita, where we try to seek balance between the conventional reality and the ultimate reality, right? From the Chittamatra point, again, we do the same. We take the same approach while we are dealing with this the remaining practice. So whatever you take as appearances, so with that kind of view, where that everything we experience is an appearance, we practice with that upeksha without getting involved, with wisdom, and then we are not working for a goal, but we are working out of our pure intention. So therefore, when we say the Buddha's karuna comes from that aspiration or intention, which is more genuine within, right? So these are a few things. There are a few other points, but I think since that alarm has gone out, I'll just come to the last part of my talk, where I wanted to talk about the modern implication of these teachings. And as Buddhism allows this kind of freedom to interpret, Nitartha Nayartha has been the tradition of Buddhism. Now, when we come to the modern thinkers, like for example, when you talk about Dharmanand Kosambi. Now, Kosambi came from a background, he was a very ardent seeker of Buddhism, but went abroad, came in contact with socialism, was influenced also by the communist revolution in Russia. At this time, he was studying Buddhism at the early 20th century, from 1901. He started studying, and he passed away in 1947. So he basically mostly did his writing before independence, Indian independence, and he was witnessing the two world wars, the rise of Russian Revolution, Gandhiji's Satyagraha movement. So he was looking at Buddhism in that kind of a framework, where he saw that Buddhism could be a way of thinking which would guide modern India. Now, when he tries to understand the Eightfold Path, it's very interesting that he interprets right view. He says right view is that you understand that the world is full of suffering. Now, the modern thinkers have never said that the world is suffering, but they say world is full of suffering. I mean, there is a difference in what you say. So they say the world is full of suffering, and this suffering is caused by man's craving. Craving of mankind. So they are not talking about personal cravings, but they're talking about these concepts on a very social or a more broader, from a very broader perspective. So he says that whatever suffering we are having, for example, Kosambi is viewing it that the suffering of the working class, or the suffering of the colonies, colonized countries. It is a result of a large-scale craving of nations, of communities, of capitalists, right? And the suffering caused by the caste hierarchies, again as a result of the ignorance of certain classes. So we are not talking simply in terms of individual craving or individual ignorance, but it's talking from the perspective of a broader communal or community-based or a nation-based ignorance or nation-based craving. And that is responsible for the suffering. And he says that unless and until we remove this craving at this level, we won't have peace in the world. So if this right view is not established, that we can't have peace in the society unless we live a moral, friendly, truthful, and humanistic behavior to other human beings, the conflicts in the world and the wars in the world will continue, and there won't be any peace. In the same way, he talks about right intention as the intention not to crave for wealth and power, because that is something which is going to cause immense suffering for the rest of the society. And therefore, the importance of Maitri and Karuna, which are other names of the remaining two right intentions, right? So he interprets the entire Eightfold Path from the point of view of this social good. I mean, how the Eightfold Path can be applied to bring in peace and well-being or social good in the world. Dr. Ambedkar, on the other hand, was facing another situation where he was fighting for the equality of people of all the human beings with democratic values. So when he interprets right view in his Buddha and his Dhamma, he says that the right view is like when you understand that the suffering of the human beings is not something which comes from the metaphysical reality or from God or from anyone else, but it is a result of human ignorance, and when they believe in metaphysical realities or speculations, things such as their belief in the Shastras and so on. So this is something which is responsible for the human suffering. And he says that understanding this will be a right view. So in Ambedkar's point of view, the understanding that what man has done, that a man, what a mind has done, only mind can undo. So this kind of understanding is understanding of right view. And then through that, the rest of the modes of practice can be derived, where he says that when we're talking about right intentions, right mindfulness, it is all about how our behavior is such that it does not cause any slavery, any inhuman behavior which cause suffering to others. So these two thinkers in modern times, they are interpreting Buddhism, they are understanding Buddhism in a broader social framework, and try to understand it as a means to achieve a society which will be free from all sorts of social evils. So Dr. Ambedkar, for example, he looks at the practice of morality as a practice of human purity, or purity of one's mind. and behavior. He understands the practice of Eightfold Path as the practice of righteousness, where when you act righteously, you kind of create a society which is not affected by injustice and inhumanity. And then the practice of virtue in terms of the practice of paramitas, where he says, I mean, it is interesting because we also had a discussion about the 4 apramayas or Brahmaviharas, that he understands upeksha in a very different sense. He says upeksha is that kind of, it gives you that kind of attitude where you work without caring for, its good and bad effects, its success and failure, and you work being very with a very neutral, so to say, but proactive, in a proactive manner. So, it is very interesting to understand this concept from the point of view of these modern thinkers, because I think they continue the Buddhist tradition and the legacy of this interpretation, reinterpretation, trying to understand Buddha's teachings to suit the modern times and modern problems which we are facing. So I'm thankful to the chair for this time, and I'm thankful to Geshe-la for giving me this opportunity. And also thanks to my secretary for sending the wrong wrong abstract, so that I get the chance to talk about this topic. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Should I make a comment? Thank you, Professor Ashok Devkar. You have given a new interpretations of the Eightfold Path. That's very good. I am very much impressed by your interpretation, one by Kosambi and other by Ambedkar. Actually, I just would like to quote Ludwig Wittgenstein. He is considered as the father of the philosophy of language in the West. And he has stated that language depicts the cultural form of life. So we have to understand the Buddhist terminology in that context. Of course, that could be interpreted in a different way. That's very important that you did it. Because Ambedkar interpretations is very relevant today. Because in the Marx interpreted history, that is economic interpretations of history. Hegel interpretation of history is a different ideological. That it is idea that controls, that shapes the human destiny, the history. And Marx said, no, it is the economic structure that determines the human existence, socio-economic, political system. So Ambedkar, of course, given a new meaning to the Eightfold Path. Of course, Ambedkar has done great service to the Buddhism also, I consider him. So that way I congratulate you for giving a new interpretations. Because, so language, the word doesn't have a fixed meaning. Its meaning is determined in the cultural, in the context. I give you one example, just for, say the Hari, word Hari has 3 meanings. Hari means Sarpa, Hari means God, deity, Hari means the frog also. So Hari Hari को खा रहा है, तो इसमें हरि भगवान भगवान को नहीं खा रहा, सांप मैन को खा रहा है. So we have to understand that cultural context. So, in the present cultural context, the socio-economic situations that we are facing, that the interpretations of Ambedkar is very relevant, I consider it. But he has given new meaning to Buddhist Eightfold Path. This is why I congratulate you for presenting a very scholarly view on this subject. Thank you very much. Now, yes,
Yes.
you will make some comments.
Yes, I am here as a respondent. I think my job here is to ask questions and make some comments based on the presentation given by Professor Mahesh. And I truly agree, all the things that he shared, and he touched on the Eight Noble Paths, pretty much on goal-based, and then their function, and in regarding to the that the goal as a Buddhist, someone who seeks the liberation from the samsara, the goal has to be some sort of nirvana, and then the function of this path is actually to get rid of all the obstacles and obscurations that comes along the spiritual journey. And in that sense, the noble noble path has its own sort of significance in that context. And then I really enjoyed, delighted of his presentation on right views from the different philosophical schools, thoughts, school. And then the first question is, when we bring these Buddhist principles out of Buddhist concept, out of Buddhist context, and make it accessible and give a reinterpretation accessible to the larger world, in corresponds to the relevance of the the social needs and demands and benefits. Then my concern is that I will not say it's my concern, but the question regarding to that is, actually Buddhist principle and then the spiritual practice are pretty much goal-oriented sort of approach, and not just goal of this life, but also some sort of long-sighted goals of attaining liberation and all these things. So when we bring these sort of path out of Buddhist context and give a reinterpretation, then as time goes on, what might implication comes up in the generations in terms of losing the deep philosophical understandings, and then the principles behind this sort of instructions and tools. That is my first question. I think we just go one by one. Okay.
One by one.
Mm-hmm.
Is this working? Or?
Oh, sir.
Yes, hello.
No.
Hello. Hello.
No. Not working. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. I think this is you asked a very, very pertinent question, because many a times this kind of question is raised, and this kind of concerns are articulated. So I think especially I know that, of course, people do, talk about some of the Buddhist concepts, taking them out of context and so on. But when I'm talking about, for example, Kosambi or Ambedkar, I think I look at them from a point of view of like they are, in a way, broadening the understanding of these concepts, not taking them out of context. See, because in Buddhism, of course, for example, we talk about Eightfold Path as a personal practice, right? Now, when we talk about personal practice, the question could be asked whether that personal practice really remains personal. Now you take any tradition, for example, you take the Theravada tradition. Theravada tradition says that when somebody becomes an arhat, even though he is having his own personal liberation, but that personal liberation is affecting the people around him, the community around him, the village, the country, and so on and so forth, right? So therefore, in Pali, in the Dhammapada, we have a verse which says that the place where arhat stays is a Ramaneyaka. Yeah? It's a beautiful place because his presence affects the entire surrounding. I mean, the world around him. Now, so if we keep this in mind, and of course in the Mahayana tradition we do have a Bodhisattva doctrine, and we all are aware of it. Now, for example, what Kosambi is trying to do, he talks about, for example, he talks about craving at personal level, at the communal level, and even at the national level. See, because otherwise you will always puzzle, like how can we understand what is happening right now in Russia and Ukraine? Do we have a Buddhist solution to this? Or do we have a Buddhist interpretation of this? Right? Or these two world wars which Kosambi experienced, he says about it that these are the results of national craving. He says the colonization which took place, where all the European countries, they actually, exploited Africa and Asia, was a result of national craving. And he actually says that when craving becomes national, it has more adverse impacts than when it is on a personal level. Because when craving at a personal level, it looks ugly. But when craving becomes national, then it is lauded, and those who are who perform it, they are celebrated in their countries as heroes. Right? You just try and recall the history and see what has happened, right? So what Kosambi is trying to do is he's not taking out this Buddhist concept out of its context, but he is trying to give it a broader context, right? Because he has seen what Gandhiji was doing at that time, how he was trying to include non-violence and truth and satyagraha into a national movement. And same way, when you see Dr. Ambedkar, what he was trying to do is like, okay, when you talk about right view, when you say that, okay, what Buddha was talking about, that I mean, what he was saying was not anything which was not said by the Buddha. I mean, so he said that right view when you deny speculations, when you deny the shastras, and in a way, if you look deeply, that's what Buddha was doing. I mean, not in these terms, but this is exactly what he was doing. He was challenging the existing notions of religion. He was talking about the equality of mankind and so on and so forth. So when he was talking about right view, Ambedkar brings in this right view, and the Buddha himself said that my only goal of my teaching is to understand suffering and to remove suffering, right? So Buddha said that this is what I teach, the Four Noble Truths, nothing else. So everything goes in that. So what these people are trying to do is that they are trying to give it a broader context. And I think it is a responsibility for us now, because we are trying to, and what His Holiness is doing also, for example, when he talks about universal responsibility, what he's trying to do is he's not taking out the doctrine of Pratitya Samutpada out of context, but he's trying to give it a broader context, right? Which is more relevant for our problems these days. Otherwise, as our honorable chairperson just now said in his opening remarks, that Buddhism is more relevant now than was in 600 BC, right? So if it is more relevant, then it has to address the issues, it has to engage with the issues of the modern times. Yeah, so that's what I would answer.
Thank you so much. Your
Second.
yeah, I'll ask the second question. Yes, beautiful answers. Thank you so much. And then my second question is, the Dr. Ambedkar is a very well sort of influential layperson and Buddhist. And today we are in some sort of, in the period of technology and internet and all these things, and so much advancements of the industrialization, and all these things, shaping individuals' mentality and attitude and their behavior and all these things. And His Holiness Dalai Lama at one point in his teaching at TCV said that back in time we used to say the sustainability or the preservation of the Buddhism is depend on the sustainability of the Sangha community. But now I see these days it depends on more sort of the lay people, their understanding of Buddhism, and not just kind of being Buddhist on names, but also being the Buddhist of 21st century Buddhist, which he refers to someone who deeply dedicate time to understand, to study the Buddhism, and become some sort of experts in Buddhism from the lay Buddhist community, and that was the expectation. And I think Dr. Ambedkar maybe is the one of example that in regarding to these sort of contexts, and to establish to nurture more sort of young generation to be in that position, to be in that sort of status, and to be able to understand Buddhism and also interpret that in a more sort of secular way, and so that many people around the world can benefit and can enjoy the teachings of Buddhism. And my question is, what monastics can play roles for disseminating or maybe kind of giving support in terms of spiritual teaching, and at the same time what kind of the back in I think I visited once in Nagpur, and there are so many Buddhist and a follower of the Dr. Ambedkar, and I was thinking, would they, any of them have some sort of willing to come to the monastery or dedicate more deeper level of the the Buddhist philosophy, and that sort of approach would be some kind of increase the, I would say, longevity or the sustainability of the Buddhism in the long run. And so what Buddhist monastics and also the lay people in combination, what kind of strategy and approach or the best the optimal ways of we can come up with. And at the same time, just to some sort of follow-up question is these between the bridging between the two traditions, Sanskrit-based Buddhist tradition and the Pali-based Buddhist tradition, Theravada and the Mahayana, by the guidance and vision of the His Holiness Dalai Lama, we have come to a point where we do now see more commonality than rather than the differences, and on the Vinaya and on the other spiritual elements, and what kind of we have been having some sort of conference hosted by different traditions and inviting experts to the conference. But what will be the further steps that we should take in terms of, progressing the dissemination of the Buddhism.
Yes. Thank you very much. The two very important questions. The first question about the Sangha community. Now, I think let me again go back to in the history a bit. See, the very lines which we often use in daily practice, paying homage to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. When you talk about Sangha, the Pali expression we always say, Chattari Purisa Yogani Atta Purisa Puggala. So the Buddhist Sangha, when we talk about Buddhist Sangha, we not simply talk about monks and nuns, right? But we talk about monks, nuns, shamaneras, shamaneries, laymen, lay women. So we talk about the entire Sangha. And I think the Buddha always addressed the entire Sangha, even though all suttas, they start with the expression Bhikkhave, and the commentators always say that whenever Buddha say Bhikkhave, that does not mean that only monks, but there were also lay people present there. But there are special reasons for mentioning them, and so we also see the same thing in the commentaries of the Mahayana Sutras. I remember Kamalashila's comment when he also discusses the Vajrachetika, for example, all these expressions. So all in all, in Buddhist tradition, I think the lay people did have a role. We have Vimalakirti Nirdesha Sutra, we have Srimala Sutra. They also talk about the great role of Grihasthas, the householders. Now in modern times, that has become more pertinent because, as you know, everywhere in Buddhist countries is an issue that the monastic community is, in a way, I think, reducing a bit. And we are having challenges. In Indian context too, we do have challenges. And therefore, when Dr. Ambedkar was trying to think about the future of Buddhism in India, he had a wonderful article where he talks about Buddhism and future of Buddhism in India, where he talks about what role a Buddhist Sangha should play, what should be its formation, and so on and so forth. So he talks about a Buddhist Sangha which is missionary in nature. So it should be more engaged in service than simply studying scriptures and meditating. So he says we need active monk community, and that was his. And he wanted it to kind of also develop more on the model of seminaries, where they get knowledge not just of Buddhism but also of other religious traditions. And this is exactly what what we see happening. That you yourself, you're doing science, and so it was so impressive. Geshe-la is writing this book on brain and mind, and so so things are opening up, and I think we are now getting more members of the Sangha community which are well versed not just in Buddhism but on many other topics, which are very helpful. Which is very helpful for spreading the Dhamma, because unless and until we make the Dhamma relevant, it is not going to survive. Dr. Ambedkar says that Dharma is always social, religion is always social, and if it loses that social character, it is it will become, it will in a way become empty. So, and therefore he wanted to kind of bridge that gap between that isolation. See, because what we see in the history of Buddhism in India especially, when Buddhism disappeared, Buddhism disappeared not just because the monasteries were destroyed, but Buddhism probably disappeared because it did not remain that vibrant in the lay community, and it did not have its very distinct role in the lay community. So that was another reason. So therefore now we in the new era, this kind of the Sangha should be again should come in a new role. And therefore Ambedkar, seeing the Indian context at his time when he converted, he in a way at one place he suggested a Japanese model of the Sangha, where the monks also get married and live a married life, but still work for the community, for Buddhism and so on. They are practitioners and so on. So some of the modern Buddhist community, Ambedkar Buddhist communities, also follow that model, which also Venerable Jürgen Sangarakshita advocated, of the concept of Dhammachari. So it's basically a lay plus monk kind of a category, where these are married people, but they are devoted 100% to the practice of dharma and the spread of dharma. So because seeing the reality. But as you said, of course that would be the first step. But again, further taking it further, we need to produce people, who go deeper into it, intellectually, as a Buddhist tradition, philosophically, and also on the top of everything, because as we just now said, the path is ultimately for nirvana. So that liberation has to be there. So what I see is that Ambedkar was not in a way against. He was not secular in that sense, because he himself was very much deeply moved by Buddhism. So often people think that it was just a kind of a more political or social reform for him, but it's not the case, because he spent 21 years before conversion, after he announced his departure from Hinduism. So he spent lots of time studying Buddhism and taking it very seriously, and he was also seriously touched by its philosophical part. But at the same time, he was aware that when he is giving a new religion to people, it should have immediate impact on their lives. So it cannot be something which is so distant for them. So he initially emphasized more. Unfortunately, he did not live long. But in his writing, like Buddha and Dhamma, you can see that he was very much spiritually concerned and was taking that very seriously. And I think this is something which need to be highlighted and need to be practiced as well. As far as your second question is concerned, I'm tending to forget what was the second question about. Can you just give me a hint? So
Yes, the bridging.
Bridging. Yes. Very good. Yes. Thank you. So I'll just give you my own personal experience. I started with Theravada scriptures, reading Pali most of the time. But when I started slowly, as a need, or started reading the Buddhist scriptures in Sanskrit, all these sutras, then I thought that they made more sense to me, because probably when I also kind of now see the links between the Theravada and the Mahayana tradition, and I saw that this is not totally different. What they are doing is they are just having it look from a different perspective, right? So that's just a different perspective. And I as I mentioned in the morning, I don't want to just kind of ignore the perspective and say, okay, this is right and the rest is not right. But instead of that, we can say that these are the same. These are different perspective of looking at the Dhamma, right? And they are all valid in their own ways. And you see, we also have this idea, but of course, in sutras, I'm aware that there were also a bit of polemics sometime. When they say that something is not so good and this is more superior than that, and so on and so forth. But I feel that we are practicing at different levels, right? From beginners up to the advanced practitioners. And at every stage, there's something that with which we can connect, and that is something which works for us, right? So I think when I look at it from a very broader perspective, I see that when you talk about ultimate reality, to reach there, we have to take recourse to the conventional, right? So without taking support of the conventional reality, we cannot reach ultimate reality. So that's where we need that wisdom. And instead of entering into any polemics, I think it is more essential that we try to understand both the traditions. In the light of each other. When I read sometime the Mahayana Sutra, I can understand the Theravada better, and vice versa. So it works that way, at least for my personal experience. And I think if we can have more dialogues, more very, not just conferences are good, but apart from that, maybe also some close reading sessions, for example, can be also, I think, more fruitful, because then we can get deeper insights into both the traditions. I mean, we talked about these different sutras today. Maybe if it happens in the future, that we read these materials side by side, something from the Mahayana side, something from the Theravada side. I think because then it is not what Mahesh Devkar has to say, or what Geshe-la has to say, but it is what Buddha says, right? So I think that would have more impact, and more. We can probably connect more closely with it. So, because then it is not coming from any sectarian background, but it is coming from the mouth of the Buddha. So I think this is something which can be done, and I think that would be certainly helpful, because this is not just a bridge, but I mean, we are just trying to take a 360-degree view, and there are different perspectives, and I think it will enrich our understanding of Buddhism. That's what I feel. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ashok Devkar, for
Mahesh. I think you should take this mic. That one is not working.
Mahesh Ashok Devkar.
Can you use this mic?
Okay.
That one is not working.
For presenting a very scholarly paper, and at the same time you have given answering some of the question in the most profound, that was full of profound thought. But there are certain problems. You have stated that Ambedkar propagated that, like the Buddhist monk in Japan, the monk of here in India or somewhere else, they should also get married and start Buddhist practicing life, and they can do greater service to the human kind. But the marriage itself, the institution of marriage is itself in a danger.
Then better they become monks.
No, I tell you, this is if you go to the West, I have been visited many times, Europe and America, and of course China also, many times. And it has become irrelevant. Even India, if you go through who they consider themselves very enlightened person, very civilized person, they don't believe in the traditional marriage, living together. You see, I have visited, say, Holland, and I have found that there are so many persons, they are living together and they have the children, but the government of the Holland have recognized, they don't consider that illegitimate children. So they have changed. If you go through the Bertrand Russell book, Marriage and Moral, then you'll find a different kinds of concept altogether. So these are something changing. Morality, there is nothing like absolute. Take off. Pardon? One minute, okay. So all these things are changing, and to my mind, I still think that Buddhism is a philosophy of nirvana and religion of compassion. And it is the only religion, future religion of mankind. This is what I feel. But as I have been asked, as I have given only 1 minute time, so thank you, all of you, for
topic is immeasurable, but time is.
Time, the concept of time is a different. You know that there is nothing like, it is eternal. Some of the Schrödinger, he said there is no past, present and future. There is only eternal present. Yeah, past and future.
I think Q&A session.
Huh?
Q&A session.
Or no?
Question and answer session from the audience.
Okay. Please, this is open to all of you. Start. If you want to push any raise your hands and just. Okay, please. I have seen his hand, so let him up बोलिए.
Please.
हेलो, दिस साइड इज सूरज राव फ्रॉम जेएनयू. सर, एलपी सर से ही मेरा सवाल है.
I
सर,
am not the speaker, I am the president.
ओके, जो भी दे सकते हैं दे दीजिएगा जवाब.
Okay.
भारत में बौद्ध धर्म के पिछड़ जाने का पर ब्राह्मणवाद का कितना असर है, कितना जिम्मेवार है ब्राह्मणवाद?
देखिए, बौद्ध धर्म हमसे पूछ रहे हैं ना सवाल. हाँ, आ रहा है. देखिए, बौद्ध धर्म के पिछड़ने का या पतन का अगर कारण अगर माने तो कोई ब्राह्मणवाद तो शुरू से था और ब्राह्मणवाद के एक तरह से विरोध में ही जैनिज्म और बुद्धिज्म का विकास हुआ, उत्पत्ति हुआ. क्योंकि समाज में इस तरह के सुपरस्टिशन, अंधविश्वास आ गया था और अभी भी है ब्राह्मणवाद में, जो मनुवादी प्रवृत्ति के लोग हैं. इस सब के विरुद्ध में एक बौद्ध धर्म या बौद्ध धर्म दर्शन लगा कि एक नई दिशा समाज को दे सकता है, समाज को शरण से बचा सकता है. बहुत दूर तक बचा, लेकिन बौद्ध धर्म पूरी तरह से पतन हिंदुस्तान में नहीं हुआ है. बौद्ध धर्म हमारी चेतना के अंदर आ गया है. हम एक राष्ट्रीय सिंबल के रूप में भी आज भी बौद्ध धर्म को मानते हैं. ठीक है, बौद्ध धर्म का मतलब यही नहीं है कि जो बुद्धिस्ट मंक बन गए या नन बन गए वही बुद्धिस्ट है. हम लोग सब बुद्धिस्ट हैं. हम लोग बौद्ध विचारधारा को, जो उसकी उदार विचारधारा है, जो उसको हम मानते हैं. केवल आप ध्यान करने से इसे नहीं, ध्यान ही नहीं पाई. ये है बौद्ध धर्म. क्या है बौद्ध धर्म? एक असंप्रदायिक सार्वभौम विचारधारा है. और ये जो असंप्रदायिक सार्वभौम भावधारा है, विचारधारा है, वही समाज को बचा सकता है, विनाश से बचा सकता है. और इसमें मैं जैसे पहले भी कह चुका हूं कि बुद्ध के जो विचार है, जो गांधी के विचार है, आज वही दुनिया को, हमको ही नहीं भाई पूरी दुनिया को बचा सकता है विनाश से. तो इसलिए अगर विनाश से बचना है तो बौद्ध के जो विचार है, जो गांधी के विचार है, मेरे ख्याल से आप अलग रख सकते हैं सोच, वो बच. तो जो अहिंसा का है, करुणा का है, मेत्ता का सिद्धांत विचारधारा है, आज देखते हैं समाज में इतना इंटॉलरेंस हो गया है. तो ये क्या है? ये इंटॉलरेंस हम हिंदुइज्म को भी या बुद्धिज्म को भी हम ठीक से नहीं समझ पाते हैं. क्या कि हिंदुइज्म में भी एक है बोलने, अरे भैया मैं आंसर का तो अयंग निज परो बेती गणना लघु चेत साम उदार चरितानांग तो वसुधैव कुटुंबकम. ये विचारधारा है। और इसको नेहरू ने जो पार्लियामेंट का सेंट्रल हॉल में है वहां पर लिखवाया है इस विचारधारा। तो ये विचारधारा तो बौद्ध विचारधारा ही है ना भाई, हिंदू विचारधारा तो सार्वभौम है, तो उसमें कहाँ फर्क पड़ता है। ठीक है, चलो तुम्हारी बात मान लेते हैं। बोलिए। अरे वो काम नहीं करता तो यहाँ से आके बोलिए।
नहीं ओके
हाँ
सबको प्रणाम। माय नेम इज अभिषेक जोशी। आई हैड अ क्वेश्चन फॉर केशवला।
जी।
We are now, and you had asked a very pertinent question to Professor also on the socially engaged Buddhism. In terms of, so there's a religious Buddhism, there's a spiritual Buddhism. I think what predominantly is coming up purely is to get more relevancy and engage to the social causes and be seen as probably working as missionaries. So what kind of changes are you seeing right now purely, since you represent a monastic order also in terms of both monasteries and how, it's changing both in terms of the paradigm of what we are studying purely as monastics and how relevant it is becoming to the social. Thank you.
Okay.
हाँ सर कीजिए।
Yes. To answer your question, I think in the monastery Buddhist communities, we do see influences, from the technology and all these things, but at the same time, implementation of the modern education, such as science and all these things. And there is two ways of look at it, One is that, His Holiness Dalai Lama's vision of, encouraging monks to study science is actually to bring Buddhist values, spiritual values, and the tools and techniques for mind training. And not under the frame of, Buddhist religion, but more sort of, Buddhist science, and then make it available to the larger world, and so that, we can be in service of, of bringing these teachings to the world, and particularly if we are able to bring these sort of, techniques and tools in a scientific way, then it has its own significance, because science is pretty much sort of, the universally accepted sort of, medium of, education, and in regarding that, I think it has a huge significance and pro and advantages in terms of providing spiritual service. And then, as Buddha said that, Buddhism, actually, Buddhist followers do not need to accept the Buddhist teachings just out of devotion and out of, and faith, but, just through the thorough, investigations. And because of that, His Holiness Dalai Lama himself also, these days, he publicly said that he doesn't believe mountain mirror. This kind of, maybe many sort of, beliefs that has been, transmitted in generations and generation, maybe having no sort of, solid foundation in terms of, rationality and reasoning. And because of that, because of that, His Holiness Dalai Lama said that, very specifically and very clearly, if there is any concrete evidence from the science to disprove any ideology or any principles of the Buddhism, then he is ready to accept that. So in that sense, I think in that sense, Buddhism, usually His Holiness Dalai Lama divides in three categories. Buddhist, kind of Buddhist religion, which is some sort of, believing reincarnation and nirvana and enlightenment and all these things. But Buddhist science and Buddhist philosophy, sometimes His Holiness Dalai Lama also not would like to touch such as emptiness and, to the give explanation, this kind of emptiness on someone who really believes the existence of the self in terms of intrinsic nature and absolute sort of objective existence. But I think because of the technology and because of the modern education, there is a concerns from many Tibetan Buddhist senior monks losing the authenticity of these deep teachings over the time, in generation to generation. And so what we really need to do, what the responsibility that really fall on us is kind of finding the right way, not going to the extremes, but in the middle way and something like that.
Please. Yeah.
Professor L.B. Singh ji, I have not really a question. Is here. Is not really a question. I have a comment here. What Professor Mahesh Deogarji said, and which Professor L.B. Singh ji really appreciated. In fact, I too join Professor L.B. Singh in appreciating what Professor Mahesh ji said pertaining to what Dr. Ambedkar ji, how he interpreted, or the other person, other scholar interpreted the right view. Say the right view. So here what I see is that I don't see any contradiction between the original teaching of the Buddha, return to law of karma, with how people abuse the contemporary situations and then let somebody suffer. So these two things they go hand in hand, and the karma is also responsible and the immediate condition is also responsible. So these two things are there. So oftentimes people who are more learned, intelligent, for them, when you speak about the one aspect of the reality, it doesn't really contradict with the second side. Whereas oftentimes when people are not too learned, so when you give the one side of the presentation, they may tend to miss the other side, then they may tend to forget the law of karma. Whereas people who have so much in the law of karma may forget the reality of the interdependence of current situation. So I think that we need to present, they give both the aspects, both the facets of the same reality, where the law of karma is responsible as well as the immediate condition. Whereas oftentimes, what can happen is that the immediate condition is actually very powerful, where people abuse the law of karma, and on that basis, many people are exposed to unnecessary problems. So therefore, these things must be addressed the way that, all these revolutions nowadays happening, the French Revolution and so forth. So these things are all on the basis of the acknowledging the reality that there is abuse of the system by some privileged people or some people, and then once that is revolutionized, then there's a greater benefit for the larger group of the people happening. So I would say that both sides are required, but to what extent emphasis should be made, it entirely depends on the situation. This is my comment. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we will end the Q&A session now. And you can take the questions later during the tea break. Please. Yeah, please come, Mullah.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Mahesh Devkar, for your very insightful research-based share on your topic, and also our chairperson, Professor L.P. Singh, for chairing this session, and Venerable La for very skillful answers on the audience questions. So with this, we come to the end of this session, and I would like to request Professor Renuka, Director of Tibet, the Director of Tushita Delhi, sorry, to kindly give the souvenirs to our speakers and the chairperson. Thank you. Professor L.P. Singh. Next, Professor. Next, Professor Mahesh Devkar. Next, Gisela Lode Sangbola. Now I would like to request all of the participants. So we will now take group photo with the speakers.